Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we are going to be breaking down the College Basketball DFS slate for January 17th, already in the middle of the month in 2024. Before you know it, we're going to be knee-deep in March Madness, conference tournaments, all the college basketball goodness that you can possibly handle. What a day today was. We had our guy, Mike Kutry, checking out the show, hanging out with us last night. We had some pretty nice calls. Our guy, Mo Diarra of NC State, messed around, got 13 rebounds. That was pretty solid. Wade Taylor with a monster. Dalton Connect with 30-plus points earlier in the day. Wade Taylor with, 41. Tremont Mark makes a game winner with 1 second. How could you not love college basketball? Truly, truly an amazing sport. What's up, Alex? Good to see you. Hey, our man Dennis Parker didn't do all that well, but Jaden Taylor finally had a suitable game. And then Diarra, man, geez, people are going to be rostering him in droves here pretty soon. We're not going to get him at sub 10% very much longer if this continues. Slate for today is finishing out pretty well. Utah State game and New Mexico is transpiring. That one will finish up the slate. We'll take a look and see how that is at the end. But we are going to be primarily focused on this 8-game main slate. Now, what DraftKings is doing right now is, instead of having like a 12, 10 to 13 game slate like they would normally do in every other year of its existence for nearly a decade, they're breaking the slates into two, meaning the main slate is 8 to 9 games. It runs from 3:30, sometimes 4, till about 5 to 6. And I'm talking PST. Sorry, I'm on the West Coast, so you're going to get West Coast time. I feel like such a weird robot being like PST, EST. And then the night slate begins at 6 this time, and it will be, up until 8 with some of those Mountain West Pac-12 games. So basically, we're getting 2 8-game slates, and there's really a way you can look at this as, there's more action, there's more teams for us to get, because truly we get 16 games instead of just the 10 to 12, right? But it also waters down the player pool. It certainly makes the contest for the later slate a little bit questionable, but there are opportunities with edge. And like you're seeing on tonight's night slate, there's less coverage usually. We're seeing a lot of the main slate. This is happening on Saturday. I'll repeat it for those of you who are maybe new. The main slate gets so much coverage from the 3 or 4 places that really genuinely cover college basketball DFS or betting. The secondary slates, such as the afternoon and the night, don't get anywhere near the coverage. We still do. We have player pools, projections, our Discord chatter, but you'll see a lot of bad lineups, news not being reacted to. Just in tonight's slate, there was, Henry Coleman was, right before a lock, ruled out. Constantly seeing guys getting scratched on these night slates, and there's not a lot of people reacting to that news, and you're seeing some dead lineups. So still opportunities here. Even though I would prefer one bigger slate myself, I do recognize that this is probably going to be here to stay. We're going to have the 2 slates each weekday, which does create a little bit more work, but college football is over, and we are in it to win it. We have to enjoy it while we have it, because it's going to be second week of April, and we're going to be like, man, now what? We're going to be talking about transfer portal, and we're going to get into college football spring practice, and there's going to be some other niche sports. But after that tournament ends, it's a pretty depressing time for guys like Alex and I. So we got to enjoy it while we have it. If you're new to the show, I want to welcome you. Thank you for checking out the Super Show. If you're a returner, thank you for returning and also hitting that like button, because I know you already did it. If you're new, it's such a simple thing. Please Sharing the show, I know, is a little bit more work. Commenting on on-demand shows or chatting with me throughout the live process is, maybe you're not into that either, and that's fine. But dropping the like, hitting that like button is something that truly helps our show. Not about like trying to make a buck off of views, because I know that takes a lot, but it does help our show be seen by the masses as people type in things like CBB, DFS, and all these other different terminologies that they might type in. We know who has the best content in all of the industry for pro sports, niche sports, college sports, all of that stuff. And we know who has the best for collegiate sports in general. So just want to be asking that you share that, or at least support the content watching, and your support means a lot to me. Not saying that we're the best, but I'm kind of saying that we're the best. No, I'm just kidding. But I am excited to talk over the slate here. We're going to focus primarily on the 8 game. What we do here is the tried and true method. We game by game breakdown, talking a little bit about the prices, anything that might be an advantageous DVP, anybody we find to be sneaky, any overpriced, underpriced, any betting opportunities, prize picks, props, all of that stuff. We have been doing more since the right around after Christmas. We started to release some projections and refining them, and that's something that people have been asking me about for the last couple of seasons. So really still fine-tuning it as we get into deeper conference play. Those are starting to get sharper and sharper. People are starting to use them for prize picks and other props, and we had some pretty good ones tonight. Stephen Crowell over 11.5 points, hit with relative ease. Wade Taylor over 18.5 real points. Obviously, he had 41. And also Dennis Jenkins. At DK, they had his points at 12.5. Now, St. John's got absolutely just curb stomped by Seton Hall. The Seton Hall team that Mike and I, and that's one of Mike's teams that he watches, think is peaking too early, and they're going to falter here soon. They continue to churn out win after win. Joel Soriano was not involved in the game very much, but who did beat his prop? Dennis Jenkins scored 15 points. I thought that 12.5 was a little bit too low. We slammed that one, and we're feeling pretty good between those props. Mike Huttrey's amazing 100 million units above on his prop betting. Those combined should make you some nice money, and the prize picks props that Stills drops in the Discord, plus what are in the article, and everything in between for DFS purposes. We're feeling pretty good here at FTN. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to bring up the first game on the slate here. Hey, it's Razzle, Well, of course, I should say the best after Razzle, of course, because we all know that's my boy. And you know what, Razzle? I think it's time for you to stop big timing me, bro. You wanna come on the show one of these days. You just gotta say the word, Just gotta say the word. All right. How about Arkansas before I get in the slate here, winning on the Tremont Mark shot? L. Ellis getting the start. Is there anybody who can raise their hands right now in the class saying that they felt comfortable playing L. Ellis, knowing that Musselman runs random starters, plays them 4 minutes, and then ends up, hurting us so badly when he does that? If you played L. Ellis tonight, you actually got a bunch of minutes, and he produced quite well. But if you say you played him, I don't believe you. You'll have to show me some screenshots later. All right, let's get into this slate here. We're going to talk about the main slate. If there's any time there at the end, I'll do the night slate. It's funny because when I have guests on, I'm actually way more efficient. I think what the problem is when I'm solo is that I just get into this zone, and I don't know, maybe I just like to talk or something when I'm alone, but I go through every single stat, every single player. So I'm going to try to remain or maintain that level of efficiency like I had last night. I mean, we got through 9-10 games in under 90 minutes, which is phenomenal. I'm sure you guys appreciated that as well. So I'm going to try and be the epitome of efficiency here. Let's get into it. Let's go. First game on the slate, Mississippi State versus Kentucky. Kentucky is a 7-point favorite, total of 153.5. Starting with this Kentucky team, relatively deep. This is one of the deeper teams for this Kentucky and on Coach Calipari. Normally, we see Kentucky come out with a slower start. They start to get heated up in the conference, and then they start to really get good as they get into March. Now, we saw this team start very fast. They came together very fast, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that they have some legitimate veterans on this team, right? Antonio Reeves, Trey Mitchell, both of those guys playing well. The freshman, Reed Shepard, Dad's a legend at the program. DJ Wagner, who's played well. Rob Dillingham, who's been great. Justin Edwards, not so great. But as those guys figure it out, they've been able to lean on those upperclassmen. Now, they did suffer that tough overtime loss to Texas A&M in 97-92. That was a great game. Wade Taylor is just a freak, by the way. Looking at it, though, there's something that I want to point out here for the Kentucky side and really what we want to look at. Aaron Bradshaw got into major foul trouble, and that's something with that other freshman who's a 7-footer. That happens. 6 minutes, 4 fouls, ended up ceding 31 minutes to Ugana Onyenso. He has been, that's another 7-footer, by the way, sophomore. He has been, missed most of the first 2 months of the season, coming off the bench, playing roughly 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes at a time. That was the most we had seen. Major rim protection in that game, 5 blocks, did have 10 rebounds, did have 7 points. Not going to be a major source of actual points, but obviously going to be an elite rebounder and rim protector. And all of a sudden, Kentucky has a couple of kids over 7 foot manning the paint that are great at blocking shots, clogging the paint. And really that's going to be tough for any team that wants to drive the lane on the offensive glass, et cetera, et cetera. With Onyenso, there's a lot of merit to think that he's going to continue to get that time. Not only because going up against Mississippi State, there's going to be the opportunity for Bradshaw to get into foul trouble, but just because I think that Onyenso has deserved it. I mean, we know, Cal, when a player is making a splash like that, he generally rewards them with additional playing time. Only 3.7K. Do I think he's going to come out there and play 31 minutes without major foul trouble? Probably not, but we don't necessarily need that. We're talking 15 to 20. Still able to get it done there. This Mississippi State team, they're veterans themselves. They're crafty. They know how to get it done. And I think Onyenso is going to be needed to really protect the paint and get those additional minutes. Also a guy who could get some foul trouble there himself, but at 3.7, a lot of that risk is mitigated. I'm definitely going to be looking that way. And I know it screams chase, but I think that the merit is there for him to get those minutes. Bradshaw playing 30 minutes like he did against Missouri, 25 like he did against Florida. I personally thought that was a little on the high side and that wouldn't continue even if he isn't getting fouls. I think he settles into more of a 19 to 22 minute type of role anyways. He's only 4.7. He, as the starter, you don't think he fouls, plays 25, or perhaps you're on the opposite. I mean, you think he's going to play upwards of 30 minutes, then I don't know how you get away from him at 4.7 either. But there is a player on the other side that is crafty at drawing fouls. There's going to be some risk here. He's a little bit more polished, a lot more polished than these freshman big men and the sophomore Onyenso. I would love to still be able to play Justin Edwards. He's one of those players that, price continues to drop. He's under 5K, stuck in the 20-minute role. He was expected to be a number 1 pick candidate, the best player in the recruiting class. Slightly ahead of DJ Wagner, and Wagner, who's had a decent season, hasn't been that great either. All things considering, it's been Dillingham and Shepard. So Edwards continues to be stuck in this kind of, 5th, 6th option on the team spot. And now with Onyenso's emergence and eventually Adu Tiero, who I believe is going to get back into the rotation and whatever the ailment that he has is going to absolve. Once he gets into the rotation as well, that's even more minutes that Edwards is going to ultimately end up losing. So we have 3 very cheap players here on this Kentucky side. Then it gets up to 6.9 where you find DJ Wagner, who has a solid floor, no doubt, but at almost 7K, there's not a lot of upside there, and we haven't seen him really pop for a big number. Way back in November against teams like Marshall, St. Joe's, Stonehill, he had some pretty big games there. But lately, he's just been putting up these 20, 24s, 21s. He did have 28 against Texas A&M, which has caused his price to go up to nearly 7K. But that's definitely paying for the top of his ceiling. There's just too many other options here. Too many shots are going to be going to Antonio Reeves, who took another 15. We know that when Dillingham's out there, he's going to be taking shots. He also took 15 there against Texas A&M. And Shepard, who has been lights out from long range, only took 5 shots. He usually taking all the threes. He has been a really good facilitator as well, having a strong assist rate in conference play. But there's just a lot of different guys around here that are going to ultimately end up hurting Wagner's overall ceiling. Now, I still am pretty hesitant to use Reed Shepard at 7.6 just because he, coming off the bench, paying almost 7.6. I know he can pop off for a 30 plus, but again, we're not necessarily getting that high upside. He did have almost 50 against UNCW Wilmington. back in early December when they lost that game, 43 against Miami before that, but that's generally not going to be something that we see from him, and I don't think that's going to be the case here against Mississippi State. In fact, I think the total is a little bit high there, sitting at 153.5. I feel like the under is a little bit in play here, and that is something that I'm going to certainly consider. Trey Mitchell at 8K. Every time I want to write him off, I mean, the price dropped 400 from last game. He's just been churning out 30-plus fantasy point games with regularity. It's a pretty tough price for me to get behind. He's an underpriced player playing out of position for a lot of the times. Now that they have Bradshaw and Onyenso, he'll be able to play more of the natural spot for him, that 3-4 tweener role, which he definitely will do well against Mississippi State here in that spot. So we don't want to write him off at 8K, but we also realize that the price might seem low for a Joel Soriano, but if he bricks there, it can do a lot of damage to your lineup. So I'm a little bit hesitant there on Mitchell for like a main lineup. GBPs, no problem. Gets over to Mississippi State. We have Tolu Smith, who is priced there at 7.2. They're really creeping up on his price. You know, he came back priced at 8K, then they dropped him to 6.7, had a real nice outing against Tennessee. Then he followed it up with a real nice outing against Bama, back-to-back 30s. Now he comes into a hostile environment in Kentucky, probably won't get a very good whistle. And we know with Tolu, there is a really big opportunity for him to have a slate-breaking type game if he doesn't pick up fouls. Looking at it so far, his fouls called rate is sitting at 5. He's played 4 games so far, so that already shows you how high his foul rate actually is. That would be the one and only thing and the reason you don't end up using him in your main lineup. Rates are fantastic, 33% usage rate, 26% shot rate, combined rebounding rate of 31%, block rate of 3.5%, steal rate over 1.5% as well. And he already proved himself in, quote unquote, bad matchups against Tennessee. But of course, that was at home there. This is going to be a much tougher spot. So I feel like Tolu, in fact, let's look. I don't have my sheet that I like to work on done yet, but the rough copy of it, I figured as much, has Tolu projecting like an absolute slate breaker, which in a perfect world, no fouls, playing 30 to 32 minutes. Yeah, Smith at 7.2 is an absolute nut play. But we know that in collegiate basketball, and especially in a tough environment like on the road against Kentucky, fouls do exist, and that is going to be a major, major issue and something we have to consider. If you run multiple lineups, it's not a decision. You just play them. But if you're running that single entry, you're definitely going to have to make a decision. All right, you have at 5.7 my guy, Josh Hubbard, the Frosh. He is taking so many shots. He is just a absolute stud, 33% shot rate, shooting 39% from long range. Always love Hubbard. The minutes are pretty low overall for what his actual role is. He's playing around 21 to 22 minutes. There are spikes of him playing 28 to 29. That would be phenomenal if he played that much in this spot against Kentucky, but I do worry about him. If his shot's not falling, he's not going to do enough peripheral wise to pay off anyways. But that 5.7 price point, again, in a just raw, like no fouls, just perfect world playing 25 minutes, he's also going to project quite well. But we do need to use our brains and realize that if he comes in there and bricks and shoots 3 for 15, probably not going to pay off that 5.7 price point. As far as any other plays go for this team, we do have Cam Matthews sitting there at 6.6, Deshaun Davis at 5.1, DJ Jeffries at 5.7, and Shaquille Moore at 5.2. Davis is sort of interesting at 5.1. Playing usually a 28 to 30 minute role, doesn't have a ton of upside, doesn't have the greatest floor either, hasn't been great in SEC play. Ever since he spurned the Washington Huskies to go to Mississippi State, he's pretty much been on a downslope. Might be a coincidence, might have to do with not choosing the Huskies. I don't know. I guess we'll never know how good he could have been coming out of Oregon State. But at 5.1, he's obviously a solid enough value, better than the value we would normally get in that range on a slate like this. All right, let's go to Ole Miss versus LSU. Hey, thanks, Scott. Appreciate the support, my friend. All right, I'm trying not to get caught looking at that last game because I think we might have a few live teams there in tonight's slate. All right, Ole Miss versus LSU. It's a 3-point spread in favor of LSU, total of 150. Now, I might be way off on this one, but we've been doing pretty well on some small road dogs. St. John's game a couple of games back, we cover the game against Kraton where it seemed like +8 was way too much. This is spot +3 for Chris Beard's squad that I do feel like they have the opportunity to not only cover, but also win outright. Maybe I'm just not a big believer in LSU. Ken Palm does have it 75-73 in favor of the LSU Tigers. They certainly have the ability, the talent, and the offensive scheme to win this game. But I think Chris Beard, he knows how to slow them down. He's still a great coach. Say what you will about him. And he has a really, really good team that's come together. The waivers that everybody has been able to get there after the NCAA was sued by our guy Ray Battle has allowed them to really open things up with the rest of the roster, bringing in Brandon Murray, who we're still waiting for that really explosive game from him. I feel like we're going to be getting close. Mo Cisse, obviously they have Jamarian Sharp, and then, of course, Flanagan, Morrell, Murray. That trio has been fantastic. And Jameen Brakefield, who wasn't great last game, but this would be a spot where Brakefield could actually do well in and would probably surprise a lot of people. With the Ole Miss side, let's start there. The starting five that they normally roll with: Jalen Murray, Matthew Morrell, Alan Flanagan. Again, that's kind of their guard trio. Jameen Brakefield, and they have been using Mo Cisse. Sometimes it's Jamarian Sharp. Sharp is the 7'5", just giant. We know Cisse is 7-footer. Both of them have foul issues. If we could ever get Cisse to a game where he plays 25 to 26 minutes, he is absolutely a very strong GPP value at 4 or 5. It's just a situation where, yes, there are going to be some foul trouble here. And I think with the way that LSU likes to attack, I think Cisse is probably an at risk. And I think we're probably going to get less than 20 minutes out of him. But that 4 or 5 price is very tasty. As far as Brandon Murray goes, sitting there at 4K. Now, he played 23 minutes against Florida, 24 against Vanderbilt, and 25 in the game before they started SEC play against Bryant. Tennessee wasn't great. He was totally overmatched, played just 15 in that one, and it was a blowout loss anyways. Like, Ole Miss got real humbled there, but got back on track, beating a what's turning out to be a bad Florida team, and then eking out a win there late against Vanderbilt. Murray, we know how good he can be. I think the minutes are starting to trend in a direction that we want to make a note of. I think we see him as far as like the bench goes here. Jamarian Sharp, Brandon Murray, TJ Caldwell. They're running an 8-man rotation. Caldwell's almost phased all the way out. He's only going to play in the sense of if there's an injury. He had the Murray minutes to himself before that. Well, now that Murray's around, Caldwell's playing 10 or less minutes. Jamarian Sharp, like I said, and Cisse just trading spots there at the 5, whoever doesn't foul. Murray, Morrell, and Flanagan are all going to play 35-plus minutes. That leaves Brakefield. And that leaves Brandon Murray. Brakefield was awful. He only played 22 minutes. There's a lot of times he's going to be very good. And then that leaves even less minutes overall for that bench, especially with the likes of Murray and Caldwell. So Murray's going to have to get out to a relatively strong start. And we're talking about Brandon, not Jalen. When he comes off the bench, he's going to need to hit a couple shots, make a play, do something warranting him to get those additional minutes. If he comes out, gets beat, bricks his first couple of threes, whatever it is, then it's going to be one of those games where he just doesn't get the time that we need. But he's only 4K. Coming into the season, or his first appearance, he was priced at almost 6K. That's because of the fact that, he was so good in his previous stops. You might remember his time at LSU, his time at Georgetown. He was an okay, starter at LSU. He did some good things there, had some pretty big games as a freshman throughout, but no consistency. For Georgetown, an absolute stud, high usage rate, one of the highest in the conference, somebody who had a very good assist rate, and overall just a really strong play. Hasn't been able to acclimate to the system just yet, and there's just so many guards in front of him. That's the problem, but he does have a couple years left. I think he's going to end up breaking out here before the end of the season, and into next year, he's going to be a big part of what this team does. Again, only 4K, playing 23 to 24 minutes at worst. Fingers crossed. A lot of that's going to have to do with the way he starts, of course. But he just seems like a very strong overall play. At 25 minutes, he's pretty much at value, which you'd love to see him be better than that at 25 minutes, because there might be only 20 for him, but that's going to be a tough price for me to get away from. We have seen a lot of ownership on Cisse just on these slates where there's kind of hard up to get value, or there's not enough slam dunk value, if you will. I do think that I would prefer to play Murray over Cisse. problem is forward is a tougher spot to fill ordinarily. And what happens is you generally want to take that value at forward when you can, just because it's so much harder to fill out the rest of your lineup. So I'm on the Murray train here, and I think I'm not going to core him or anything, but I'm probably going to be pretty high on him. And we've had some fairly good success with these 3.8 to 4K guys lately. Mo Diarra earlier today, of course, my man from South Carolina there. Murray Boyle, he's playing really well. If he can ever make free throws, he's going to be an absolute stud. So I'm going to continue to do that. And it's not going to lead us to paying up for a 10K guy, which there isn't one on the slate anyways. It's just going to allow us to fill out the rest of our roster with those strong 7 to 8K plays, which is what we're going to continue to do in the modified balanced lineup that we like to typically run. On the LSU side, you have Jalen Cook at 7.2. That's a real nice GBP price for him. Not a ton in the peripherals. He's not exactly a Cam Thomas. He's a better than Cam Thomas in that regard. He's about the same type of scorer, maybe a little bit less of a scorer than Cam Thomas in college. Not talking about now Cam Thomas, but in college. Cook is capable of pouring in 30 real points. I like him quite a bit. I don't love the spot against Ole Miss, considering the defense that Chris Beard does teach his team to play. But overall, we're looking at a pretty solid 30-plus minutes here from Jalen Cook at 7.2. He would be the guy that I'd want to look at. All right. We don't have a co-host today, so I got to turn on my heater fan, because I don't know if you guys noticed last night, like I was on the verge of like teeth chattering cold being out here in my garage office. So let me plug this bad boy in. If you guys have trouble hearing me, then we'll just be like this. All right. Us Pacific Northwesterners, it doesn't rain here as much as everyone says. It's usually overcast. So anything outside of like 55 to 65, it's like, it's so hot at 66. Oh, it's so cold at 54. I'm, of course, being sarcastic, but a lot of people around here act like that. All right, the Jordan Wright play at 7.6. This is your best overall LSU play. Of course, you're going to have to pay for it. He is playing extremely well. He has been the alpha on the team and completely taken over when they need a bucket. He tends to project very well. I find it hard to get him in on a game-to-game basis, but it's worth noting because I do pay attention to ownership in various contests. The last few LSU slates, he has been relatively high owned. Not 60, 70% owned, but we're talking 25 to 35% owned, which on these 8+ game slates, that's a pretty high amount of ownership for a guy like Jordan Wright. And he has been panning out pretty well for those chalk pieces. And he is one of the best projections early on for this LSU team. With the insertion of, don't get any ideas there, Razzle, Jalen Cook in the lineup has changed things a little bit. Let me get this pulled up. So like in their Auburn game, for example, we did see Mike Williams. He's been missing more and more minutes as they go. So they started Jordan Wright, Will Baker, Derek Fountain, Jalen Cook, Mike Williams. But then we saw Trey Hannibal, who's been getting more minutes, and Tyrell Ward both play 23+. Jalen Reed played 21, Hunter Dean 11, Milwaukee Wilkinson barely played at all. That took minutes right out of the pot from Derek Fountain, Mike Williams, and actually Jalen Cook lost a little bit there too. But they were completely overwhelmed by Auburn. This Auburn team that we despise right now for DFS purposes because of how deep the rotation are, they're a very well-oiled machine, and they're just absolutely wrecking people. This was a game where LSU was completely overmatched, and Cook just couldn't get anything going, turning it over a lot. So they turned to Tyrell Ward and Trey Hannibal, both of which were hitting threes with reckless abandon, and that's why they got those additional minutes. I do like Hannibal sitting there sub 5K at 4.9. Minutes starting to trend up, perhaps. We saw Hannibal last year. He was a viable value option throughout the second half of the season. And it looks like we're going to be in a similar position with Hannibal again this year, as his viability is definitely there. His price continues to rise, but hasn't eclipsed 5K yet, and we're able to still get some little bit of value there with him if we want. Now, Jalen Reed sitting there at 4.6, Tyrell Ward at 3.9. I'm a little bit worried about a repeat performance for Ward to play 27, just because I think we see Cook play more. Hard to say with Mike Williams, but they went with a little bit more of a bigger lineup there. I don't know that that will be the case here against Ole Miss, and I think we see Cook get back to the higher minutes, which will push Ward back to more like a 15 to 18 minute range. At 3.9, I get the reasons and why you'd want to use him, but unless he was starting, I think you're going to be real hard pressed to make that one work. I would rather just pay the 100 more in the same game for Brandon Murray, who at least I know, or I think I know, is going to play 20-plus minutes. All right, moving on to the next game here. And we are just trending horribly on time. I tell you, you get me alone and you just can't shut me up, man. Kraton versus Yukon. Yukon -6, 144 total. Now, after Yukon won the title last year, I hope I don't come off like a blowhard, by the way. Like I am so against that in the industry, but sometimes we gotta pat ourselves on the back. And anytime I get like a troll on one of my tweets or something I say, I always gotta like pull back the receipt if it worked out well. And if I'm wrong about something, not Isaiah Wong, but actually wrong about something, I will own that as well. And I think you guys appreciate that about me. But Yukon, after they won the title, looking at their roster, what they were bringing in and what they were losing, I made the statement that their championship window is going to be open for at least another 2 to 3 years. And obviously without knowing what the future is going to bring past this year, who leaves, who comes in through the portal, you're looking at the youth of some of their players like Alex Caravan. Obviously they brought in Cam Spencer, but they have the pieces to win the title again. And now that they're the number 1 seed per the AP poll, people are starting to realize like, whoa, this Yukon team is ridiculous. They don't have Donovan Clingan. They haven't had him for quite a while now, and they're still just beating team after team, playing extremely well. Now, if the tournament were to start today, I think you have to make Purdue the number 1 overall seed. And there was a big, debate when the AP poll dropped, and Purdue fans on Twitter like, how could you do this to us? Like, damn, guys, it's the AP poll. Like, who even cares? It's a talking point. I get it. But so don't worry, Purdue fans. Like, you're still the number 1 overall seed, clearly. I don't know if you want to be the number 1 overall seed, though, playing a 16 seed. It might not be the best thing. But Yukon right now is clearly the best team in the country as it stands. The polls are simple. Like, you win games, you move up. And if you lose games and the guys around you win, you're going to fall back. So very, very simple there. And you look at what Yukon's played. St. John's, that was a strong win at home. St. John's, I know they didn't look great today, but they are good. DePaul, not great. Butler is a much improved team. Xavier, they're definitely dangerous. When it comes time to Big East tournament, watch out for Xavier. We're going to definitely be betting some futures on Xavier for the tournament there for sure. And then Georgetown, which Ed Cooley doesn't have his guys. They're bad. So the teams they've played, it's been a mixed bag. And they're the ones that got their doors blown off by Seton Hall back at the end of December, right before Christmas, by 15, where it's like, whoa, what? And Seton Hall's been just amazing ever since. Peaking too early, right, Mike? Now they come into a home game playing Kraton. Ken Pom has it 74-68. Again, they're a 6-point favorite. I actually like that. I think going up against a Kraton team that the bettors seem to fall in love with, and the industry as a whole is just Kraton crazies, if you will. This team's always getting hyped. I got murdered when I said they weren't deep enough to make a tournament run last year, and they did. Got something wrong. It'll happen again. And I think that this Yukon team is going to prove just how good they are to some of the few doubters that are left by checking this Kraton squad and keeping it relatively low scoring, for them in the maybe upper 60s, low 70s. But without Clingan, this team has been phenomenal. You add Clingan back in the mix here when he's ready, and it's going to be a really tough situation with the team that has championship experience, has point guard play, has three-point shooting to a degree. Look out for this Yukon squad. And this is going to be a big game for them as a prove-it spot against a team that I think still to this day gets a little overrated in Kraton. Looking at Yukon, you have had the last 3 Yukon stack or slates ending in stacks. If you did do 2, 3, 4-man Yukon stacks, you just absolutely own the competition. Lately, you've been able to just plug in Cam Spencer, even though his price now has come up, so you're not going to be able to. But Spencer, Tristan Newton, and Stephen Castle, those guys had all 3 been too cheap. The last few slates, you could just plug them in, stack them up, and they return 30-plus fantasy points for you with ease. Now the prices are up on all of them, making that a little bit more difficult. Castle sitting there at 7.3, still a really good play. The cheapest of that group, still like him. I know he had a sort of down game, 25, but that's pretty comforting knowing that at this price, he's going to push that 4X. He's healthy. He's definitely a high draft pick. He's playing the way we expected him to. This is a guy that should be priced up over 8K, and anytime he's not, we need to definitely consider using him in all formats against any opponent. Tristan Newton's price below 8K, sitting there at 7.8. His price dropped below 8K against Xavier. He exploded and went back to 8K. He had a nice 30-plus point performance again. Now it's back to 7.8. I don't know if he's going to seesaw between 7.8 and 8. Now, Newton does have a floor of sorts because he will defer. Depending on the game flow, if Connecticut has control, he won't shoot as much, or he'll defer to his teammates and just rack up assists. And he's very good at getting peripherals, very safe floor for that reason. But his scoring is going to be secondary usually. He's going to be behind Cam Spencer. He's going to be behind Klingon. He's just going to actually facilitate, and it depends on if the game's going to be close or not. Now, this should be a close game. It should be throughout. This will be a good environment for Tristan Newton, but he's still the third option for me behind several of the others, Castle being one of them. Now, Cam Spencer has been somebody rostered by 5% or less of the masses in 3 straight slates. Tell you this is something I pay attention to. Now that he's priced at 8.1, it's really getting to a point where I don't know that we can roster him in our main. Still some GPP exposure, sure, but we're going to have to jump off here. You look at what he's usually 7.2, 7.3, even up to 7.6, playing 35-plus minutes, taking a bunch of shots. He's got a strong rebounding rate for his size. He's got a pretty solid assist rate. We know he can knock down triples as good as anyone in America. And he's been adding stocks the last 3 games. He has 3+ stocks in each of those last 3 games. That's pushed him up into the 40 fantasy point range. Paying 8.1 for him, I think, is tough. Nobody's going to really do that. So you will have another opportunity for you GBP heavy players to get Spencer at another sub 5% on an 8-game slate with how he's been playing. I think he's pretty well, out for looking at the pay-ups on this slate. He's as good as any of the other options. And he just has a really safe floor. Like a bad game for him in this one will be like 27 to 29. And that's not a complete disaster at 8.1. He's not ahead of Newton for me, though. If it's Castle and then the next option is going to be Alex Caravan. Now he's priced up there at 7.7. That should also keep his overall ownership a little on the lower side, but he has taken over a massive amount of the pie here with Klingon down. He's rebounding at a higher level. He's being more aggressive on offense, and that's all I ever wanted last year for Caravan. He was always one of my guys last year. I haven't rostered him as much this season because he's been so much more expensive, but look at what he's been doing in Big East play. 17.7 rebounds against DePaul, 20 points, 5 rebounds against Butler, 14, 4, and 3 against Xavier, and then the 26, 5, and 2 game that he just had, knocking down 6 threes against Georgetown on his way to 41 fantasy points. Looking at the guys on Kraton that would be defending him, I don't think they have the personnel to properly guard him. He's just way too versatile. When people think of, not unguardable, but, tougher to defend options, most people aren't going to think of the name Alex Caravan. Watch some Connecticut games if you haven't already. Bigs struggle because of his versatility on the outside. Smaller wings struggle because he can bang down low a little bit. He will hit the glass, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty and get down there and play physical defense or also hit the paint. So I'm a big Caravan fan, have been for a long time. He's my favorite play after Castle. Then it's Newton. Then it's Spencer. But the Connecticut stack remains in play. You may not be able to fit it as easily as we have been because the prices are up on all of them, but we'll unearth a little bit of value here as we go. And we've already found a few pieces there, on the Kentucky side with Onyeso. Obviously, Murray on Ole Miss. It's a little bit more speculative value, but we can make it work, especially if it means we get 3 Connecticut guys in that put up 35 plus each. Not saying that we're going to do that, but we can make it happen if we want. Then you have Samson Johnson, who's there at 5'6". Fouls have created a situation where his minutes are quite erratic. We probably need to see him get into the low 5K range before we really consider him. I think he's probably going to play well against Kraton, but with Kalkbrenner, I do see fouls in Johnson's future once again, even in a home game. And then Hassan Diarra at 4.5. He's always in play. We got the absolute nut performance from him against DePaul. So that's like the one time I use Diarra, and I probably won't use him in my main again. But at 4.5, 20 plus minutes, he's certainly in consideration there. At least he's somebody you can get 3x out of, especially if it's a slate where you're starved for value, tighter pricing perhaps, which this isn't necessarily the case. He is somebody that we can definitely consider. All right, on the Kraton side, it's a 3-man show and has been all season long. Starts with Baylor Shireman, who's there at 8-9, playing, in competitive games, he's going to play 39 to 40 minutes. And that's a nice thing about paying up for him. You know exactly what you're going to get from Baylor. He's going to rebound well. He's going to flirt with 40 fantasy points. And at worst, he's going to give you a nice solid 30 to 32. Now at 9K nearly, we need more from him. So he's more of a luxury option. He's not a main guy that I'm looking to pay for. That's how I'm looking at it right now. You have Kalkbrenner sitting there at 8.3. I don't particularly love that. His low 8K range price is definitely good for him. It's better when he's in the upper 6, 7K, mid 7K range. The fact of the matter is he was able to play 38 minutes against St. John's, 39 against Providence, 34 against Georgetown with very minimal foul issues. And right now, Kalkbrenner is rebounding the best of his life. We always joke about Kalkbrenner rebounding props, for all of last year, just taking money from us because it'd be 5.5, 6.5. Shit, sometimes it was 4.5, and he still wouldn't hit the over, even though we continue to chase that because it just seems so easy for a player of his stature and size to get rebounds. Well, he has in Big East play had 9+ rebounds in 4 straight games, and it seems he's finally being more aggressive, not relying on his jump shooting and playing a more finesse style. He's actually working the glass with consistency. We knew he could do it, but now we're starting to see it at the highest level of his career. And then you have Trey Alexander there at 7.7. Now, that's obviously a tasty price. This kid was 8.5 on the last slate that he was just on. 27 and 22 fantasy points in back-to-back games. This is part of that DK dynamic pricing where prices are going to skyrocket one slate on a big game, and then they're going to go down when they have a quote-unquote bust. Now, I don't know that a 27 is a bust. Certainly at 8.5, it's not doing you any favors, but it's also not the worst game imaginable. The St. John's performance wasn't great. He shot 3 for 14, but the volume is there for him. The usage is there for him. He's clearly a nice option. I don't typically like to utilize players against Yukon unless the slates are 5 or less games, but I'm certainly going to have to look at that Trey Alexander price and do some, tinkering here and where he fits into our builds. I think it's probably going to be some alt team exposure for me. But sitting there at 7.7, there just seems to be some nice GPP upside. But again, it's not the best matchup in the world. Going into Yukon's house, I don't want to be stuffing in a bunch of Kraton guys. And I'm not going to be going to Mason Miller, who is very cheap. We know that. Stephen Ashworth, who's relatively cheap. They do have some nice value, certain matchups, but this is not a certain matchup that I want to be looking to the Farabello, Ashworth, Miller group. Ashworth, man, he's gotten 20 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, but he's just not that same guy that he was at Utah State, playing better competition, sure, but he should be playing better than this, especially playing 28+ minutes. He's just, and when you look at his individual stat lines, it's not as if they're horrible. 5.3 is a livable price for him if you want to go that route, or you have a couple hundred more and you don't want necessarily like the 4 to 8, 4-9 type range players and you want to go to Ashworth. That's perfectly fine, but you have to be able to live with the 10 that he might give you in this spot. Hey, Trevor. Yeah, man. It was a great slate of games. It was, we had some hit or miss mixed results at times, but I think the major hits were good. And shoot, like the Tremont Mark game winner, like that just got to get you hyped up. I mean, college basketball is phenomenal, and we're going to have so many games each and every day from here on out. It's just going to be a fun ride, but you have to enjoy it and slow down a little bit because honestly, you're going to blink and March is going to be here, and then one shining moment's going to hit, and we're going to get teary-eyed. But yeah, man, today was fun. I really felt good. I feel like we're getting enough conference games under our belt now and for the projections to start really being accurate. And it brings me a lot of joy to see the green screens in the Discord the prop hits that Mike delivers. Like, we just got a good thing going right now. So appreciate your continued support, my friend. All right, next game here, Nebraska versus Rutgers. Rutgers 2.5-point favorites, total of 142. I really felt like Nebraska, this was the year they're going to break through under the mayor. Fred Hoiberg's got them at 13-4, heading into the Iowa game 13-3. Should have been 14-3, but man, did they ever brick. And teams have been starting to brick against Iowa. I don't know if they're waking up. Maybe they're going to start peaking too early, a la Seton Hall, but rough spot. They have lost 2 of their last 3. They did beat the doors off of Purdue at home, but a road loss against Wisconsin, the road loss against Iowa. Now they're on the road here against Rutgers. Ken Pom has them winning this game 70-69 over Rutgers. I was going to say it is a little bit peculiar to see Rutgers 2.5-point favorites. I get it because of, being at home, but I think it's closer to a pick 'em, or maybe they're just 1-point favorites at best. So there is a betting opportunity here, but road games in collegiate basketball, you know how tough they can be. So you have to tread pretty carefully there. Starting with the Nebraska side, Bryce Williams there at 7K. Now, he was pretty awful against Iowa in a spot that he should have absolutely detonated. Still played his customary 30 to 31 minutes, so we know what we're going to get out of him. He's going to be on the floor. He's dealing with a few, bangs and bruises and that kind of thing. But for the most part, he's going to be out there for 30 plus. And if it's a competitive game, you could see him get upwards of 35 as well. I'm a big fan of his overall. He contributes in all categories. I do think this is a nice spot to target him, even in the tougher confines that Rutgers is in. Rink Mast at 7.6, a little bit more expensive there, playing big minutes as well. Mast has been a real nice addition to this Nebraska team. Overall, 23% usage rate, 25% shot rate, even shooting 33% from long range on 53 attempts. Has a combined rebounding rate of 30%, 19% assist rate, and you can see he's filling in that Derek Walker role quite well. That was made famous last year by Walker as a quarterback-style big man who is able to hit mid-range jumpers, make passes, grab rebounds, low post, shoot from the outside, just a very versatile type player, and Mast is certainly that. You also have Kasai Tamanaga, who has never met a shot he won't take. There at 6'2" is just okay for me. I think typically if we get him in that 5 to 6K range, I'm pretty high on him compared to the rest of the field, or at least I should say, let me rephrase that. I'm at level with the rest of the field there. I don't think I'm ever more excited than the field. Then when he gets over 6K, I'm kind of underweight on him just because he is so reliant on shooting. I don't particularly think this will be the best spot to utilize him. I think he could actually struggle here to a degree against this Rutgers team. I would much rather go with Williams or Mast, but of course it's going to cost you a little bit more. Juwan Gary there at 6'4". Now Gary, it's real tough to get him right now. We were fortunate enough to off the bench a few games there in December that he just obliterated off the bench. Now, he has been tougher as a part-time starter. Now it seems like he's getting a full-time starter because the foul rate has spiked because of the additional minutes that he's seeing. 14 minutes played against Iowa, couldn't get himself out of foul trouble, had 18 fantasy points in the 14 minutes. So it's frustrating because had he played 30 minutes against them, there's no doubt in my mind he wouldn't have put up close to 35 to 40. Against Purdue, 33 minutes, had a nice solid outing there. I think we see him get back to that. Now, a lot of this is going to have to do with how tight that whistle is. You got the front court on the other side of Cliff Almarui, the athleticism of Andre Hyatt, Moat Mag. So there is going to be some more issues here for Gary potentially. And where that leaves us with him is he's probably better suited as a alt team play. I don't know that we can utilize him in our main team lineup right now, unless you're more of a riskier player. If you're a little bit more lenient towards taking risks, if you're a little tighter, as they say, or you don't like taking that risk, then I think Gary's probably not somebody you want to explore. As far as anybody else, Alex lost his minutes predictably. We have seen Eli Rice against Iowa. He played a little bit more. I don't know that would continue. Jerron Coleman has seen a minute spike. He's only 3.5. Will that continue? Not likely. We're almost never using CJ Wilcher because of his low rates. He's playing about 18 to 20 minutes. And then, of course, you've got Sam Hoiberg there at 4.4, has played 20-plus minutes in 4 straight. He's not the worst-looking value at 4.4 if you need somebody who is playing those kind of minutes. But against this Rutgers team, I do think that's going to be a little bit tougher for him. Really just leaves us paying for Williams or Mast. Not very imaginative, I know, taking the top 2 most expensive players on a team and telling you to play them. But that's sometimes how easy it is. On the Rutgers side, we're getting to a price on Cliff Omarui that we can play him. It hasn't happened all season long, at least for me and a lot of our community members, because paying almost $9K for Cliff Omarui with a lower overall usage rate, a bunch of guards and wings around him that don't really make that extra entry pass like they should, and he has to get majority of his points and shot attempts off of putbacks, and it's really tough to operate that way. Look at his shot attempts over the last 5. 6, 6, 4, 7, which is might as well be 15 for him, and 5. Where he gets a lot of his points also is at the foul line when he's actually getting the rock and able to draw those fouls. Now, he's also a bit of a fouler, so you do have this dynamic at play here with Juwan Gary and Clifford Omarui. One of them is going to be in absolute tilting foul trouble. If you pick the right one that isn't, they're going to go off because it'll be less physical on the paint. If Omarui ends up sitting with 2 fouls early, then Gary, Mast, those guys are going to have a field day. If it ends up being Gary on the sidelines, then Omarui should have a big rebounding game and potentially put up 12, 13, 14 rebounds. Hard to say how many points he'll actually score. You see, he had a 31 fantasy point game against Indiana. He only scored 5 real, so he doesn't have to score to pay off. And now that we're under 7K, we're certainly looking at and considering strongly playing Cliff Omarui. But again, he's another of those really risky options, but the price has now put him smack dab in our player pool, and he's somebody that I have a feeling a lot of people might try to use because that is an interesting price for him for sure, and you get it in a forward slot there. You have Mawat Mag at 6'8" and Andre Hyatt at 6'2". I like the price on Hyatt. I feel like Mag's been, he's been crushing. He's taken on almost like a semi-alpha role, him and Simpson kind of splitting that, right? But Mag's price has just gotten so high. He's playing a ton of minutes, 34, 36, 32. Only if she's 5'10". But he's just way too expensive. I like Andre Hyatt instead because he has better rates, similar minutes, and obviously has a little bit of foul issues himself at times, but he's a better 3-point shooter overall, has taken more volume. And just, I think overall Hyatt has a nice little bit of upside there at 6'2", and he's not somebody that people typically look to roster. He gets a forgot about because he's wedged in between Simpson, Mag, and Omarui. And also looking at his game logs, he hasn't had any massive games here recently. You have to go back into the December to see some really big blow-up games, and those were against some weaker competition. So we might be looking at more of a non-con hero with Andre Hyatt, and I just haven't given him up yet. But I do still like him, and I do plan to have what I suspect will be over the field exposure to him in my 20-plus lineups. When it comes to the guards, Derek Simpson, if he's cheap, you can play him. Over 6K, it's getting pretty tough. Minutes are all over the place. If Jermichael Davis, when he's out, and we're going to get 30-plus minutes for Simpson, then he's a go. But now we're seeing Davis, he's back. He's playing over 20 minutes. Then we're seeing a situation where Austin Williams is starting. He played 32 minutes in their last game, 24 before that, 23 before that. He's only 4-1 as a starter, so obviously in consideration. And what's happened here is Noah Fernandez has played less than 15 minutes in 3 straight games, being almost phased out of the rotation entirely and not even starting. But this has negatively impacted Simpson as well, and they've gotten pretty deep there on the perimeter. So you're really just looking to Omarui, or you're looking to one of Hyatt or Mag. I don't really want to mess around with the guards too much. And I think Nebraska's defense is good enough to warrant fading those guys for the most part. But Williams price at 4-1, if we think he's playing 30-plus minutes again, then he's going to be a tough one to get away from for sure. Hell yeah. The people that I got a sidebar here for a second. I appreciate you guys interacting with me in the chat. Makes it fun for me and everybody here. This little doozy here, college NBA. There are so many people that will take the pro NBA the people that think NBA basketball is the best ever, they'll take a college game and they'll take like a real rough one, right? Like Virginia game that's in the 30s and nobody can make any shots. They'll be like, this is the product that's better than the NBA. It's like, okay, so you're gonna take the a bad game environment and just go run with that. Okay, sounds good. So we can do that with the NBA, right? We can go and I don't know, take the Detroit Pistons, the mighty Pistons, who are building through the draft, and that seems to be working quite well for them. I don't know, against the Washington, I was going to say against the Washington Wizards, but I guess they are kind of entertaining, right? Let's say against the Memphis Grizzlies, and when Gigi Jackson's not going ham like he did yesterday, like, ooh, that's probably going to be a great game, right? Like I just can't fathom it. And then the fact that if it's the first 3 quarters, no defense played or care to play defense, and then the last 3 minutes, like generally speaking, and I've heard other people say this, I don't watch a lot of NBA, like, and what I mean by not a lot is none. So I could be just talking on my ass here, but when I was watching NBA, you could actually not watch the first 45 minutes of it, just tune on the last 3 and then see like all the tryhards in the world go to it and see these 30-point leads just evaporate before your very eyes. Now that happens in college basketball as well. Texas A&M came back from a deficit. Basketball is a game of runs, but to me, the non-playoff NBA basketball, if you think it's better than college basketball, I don't know that whatever I say can change your mind. It's kind of like politics, right? But you're wrong. That's all I'll say. But yeah, because I don't know who can watch college basketball, see these buzzer beaters, see these like Dalton Connect dropping a 30 piece, Wade Taylor putting together a game like that and not get super excited about it, or McNeese State just mowing through their conference right now with Will Wade, the American gangster. I don't know if if any of you guys got ESPN Plus or the capability to stream old games, stream the last couple of McNeese State games, get yourself knowledge up about them, because in March they're going to win a game in the tournament and you're going to look like a genius in your office pools and betting opportunities and all that stuff. But yeah, college basketball, man, it is the shit. No doubt about it. All right, let's get on to the next game here. FSU versus Miami. Now, this is another one that looks weird to me. Like I don't claim to be Mr. Pro Better. I like to feel like I know college basketball enough that I can spot an odd line. And now that I have a sports book literally in my backyard, like, I'm there a lot. And the 7.5 point spread for Miami seems a little bit off to me. The total is nearly 160. Now, FSU, they haven't gotten the credit they probably deserve as being a team with better than I think the metrics or on paper will say at defense. Now, they are playing in a top 50 tempo, and they are only 10-6. And they had a game earlier where they gave up nearly 90 to Florida, and this was early in the season. But after that, I watched them against UNLV on a net neutral court. They ended up winning that game 83-75, and they stifled UNLV for that last 5 minutes. And I thought, this is a team under Coach Hamilton. Obviously, he's probably a little bit more on the wash side now. I like Leonard Hamilton, but what he's doing in Florida State's not great. But he has his team playing pretty damn good defense. And again, I know they just gave up, well, not just, but back in December, they gave up almost 90 to South Florida. So you're going to look at that and be like, what? But they've been really, really good so far in conference play. They gave up over 80 to Wake Forest, but they ended up outrunning them. They held Notre Dame to 58. They held Georgia Tech to a low 70s total. Virginia Tech to a low 70s total. There is just something to me about this Florida State team that says they're a lot better than people think, both defensively and overall. So, and I know it's a road game, so it's tricky. Maybe if this wasn't at home and we saw a line like that, we could be like, let's go. This is a generational wealth opportunity, but that just seems like a very high number to me. And looking at Miami, they're getting healthy. They're getting their guys back. Larinaga is a really good coach, but you can't drop a game to Louisville no matter who's out, and you can't drop a game that you seemingly had control of, like you did against Wake Forest, which ultimately they lost in overtime. Now, they do have a solid win over Clemson. Clemson's starting to heat up again here, and they are coming off the slim 4-point road win over Virginia Tech, despite Sean Padula doing his best MJ performance the last couple of games. Ken Palm has an 81-75 in favor of Miami, but I tell you, I don't know if I believe it. So this is a betting spot for me. I might just do the old alt line spread that I like to do and get a couple extra, points there in a parlay or something. Not buy points, but the alt spreads, they got some pretty advantageous numbers sometimes you can choose. Looking at it, this is what they did against Virginia Tech. Matthew Cleveland played 39 minutes. Wooga Poplar played 36. Nigel Pack played 35. Omier 32. And then Bensley Joseph 22. The freshman Keyshawn George has just been far too good. They got to play him more minutes now. Whether it was Pack out or Poplar out, one or the other, George had got all those starter minutes, improved his worth. Before that, Miami had no bench to speak of. They wouldn't even give George opportunities, and they're running their starters on the ground. What's happening? They're getting minor injuries, bumps, bruises. They're having to miss a game here or there. They got to develop that bench. They have Christian Watson, who's super young, AJ Casey, super young, Ja'Kai Robinson. All those guys are sophomores. They're still relatively raw, but they gave them decent enough minutes. Now that the starters and their main rotational players are back, and all healthy for the most part, as healthy as they're going to get, they're still continuing to give Keyshawn George minutes. And I think that's a good thing because now we're looking at a 6 to 7 man rotation here under Larinaga, and the Keyshawn George Frosh is staying in that, and he definitely deserves it. Minutes-wise, I think we see him continue to play a pretty big number there between 25 to 30. Against Louisville, he only ended up playing 18, but it just makes too much sense for him to be on the court. Now, his price isn't cheap enough for us to use. I'm just bringing that to your attention that his price probably going to keep falling a little bit, but it might not fall fast enough because of the fact that he's going to continue to get minutes, and he might even continue to outperform Bensley Joseph, who just, outside of a few games early in the year, hasn't looked very good at all. Priced at 6.8, that's like way overpriced for Bensley Joseph. I know he had a 41 earlier this year against North Florida, but more often than not, we're looking at a sub-20 fantasy point game from Bensley Joseph. So you can't use him. Nigel Pack is priced appropriately. No longer do we have to be sitting there looking at a 4.7, 6K, 6.2 Nigel Pack. They've got him up to 7.5. It's a decision for people. We don't have to, force him into our lineups and matchups that maybe we don't want to use him in. This is not a spot we have to feel obligated, and it's not a price that we have to utilize. If I'm paying for anyone, it's generally still going to be Norchad Omier because of how high his usage are, how great his overall peripheral numbers are across the board. He's the guy that I want, even though he's priced at 8.5. Or I do like, for GBP purposes, Wooga Poplar sitting there at 6.9. And this is a spot against FSU. If anybody is going to have success against their defense, I think it would be Wooga. More of a GBP look, but we're talking about a guy playing 35-plus minutes, taking 12-plus shots. So I like Poplar. We always like Norchad. And then you have Matthew Cleveland after his 45 against Louisville and his 31 against Virginia Tech. He's priced at about 8K. It's neither overpriced or underpriced. It just is 8K and probably where he should sit for the majority of the season. That's what I like to call the 2022 Kraton, where they're fine plays, but there's no real upside there to speak of. Going to play the whole game. On the FSU side, it is not quite the situation of Leonard Hamilton where, in years past, he's playing 15-plus guys. Now, the last season or two, he's been dealing with injuries galore, which has forced him to have a smaller rotation. But now that he's got majority of his players back, Primo Spears got his waiver, we're talking about vintage Leonard Hamilton here to a degree. Now, again, it's not as bad as he was 2, 3, 4 years ago, but he's still looking at 12-plus players. The starting lineup has maintained Deontay Green, Jameer Watkins, Baba Miller, Jalen Worley, and Darren Green. Then we get Primo Spears as the primary sixth man, and then we have minutes split between Chandler Jackson, Jalen Gainey, Cam Corhan, and sometimes Taylor Bull Bowen. Occasionally, you'll see Josh Nickelberry or Tom House, the husk of those two, the corpse of those two, step off the bench and play 2 minutes or less. So it's a pretty deep team. Ordinarily, we want to look to target against Miami because of the way that their style is. They play a fantasy friendly type of game. Obviously, they're top 60 in tempo. Defensively, they've suffered this year, and now you've got Florida State coming in playing a top 50 tempo. There should be scoring in this game, but I do think there's an opportunity for Florida State to show up a little bit defensively, and it makes me not really like this game, and I think people might be a little bit overweight on it, and I'm going to back off more. Outside of maybe some one-off Primo Spears, because he's a guy that I want to be first on. There's always one or two. I haven't had as many posh play of the days this year, but I do have players that I feel are a little sneaky. Primo is one of them. Not starting yet. I don't know why he really should be. He's taken a ton of shots, has a high usage rate, sits there at only 6K. We know from his previous spots how great of an offensive weapon he can be. He would be the one that I'd want some GBP shares of. But other than that, I'm not really looking to target anyone. Jameer Watkins has been the high upside guy for this team, but he's priced at 7.4, and he's not immune to getting a 18 to 20 fantasy point game. So you have to tread kind of carefully there when it comes to Jameer Watkins or anybody on the Florida State team in general. All right, next game on the slate, Virginia Tech versus Virginia. It's a 3.5 point spread, a total of 124.5. So whoa, watch out, the typical Virginia barn burner game here. With the Virginia side, we'll start with them. Let me get this pulled up. Not a lot across the board. I think Virginia Tech is a team that we don't necessarily have to stray from. We can target against them when there are pricing deficiencies or somebody coming in that has been playing extremely well, for example. Like, they're definitely not a elite defense that we need to fade. They're good, but we don't have to fade people against them. When it comes to Virginia, we know the deal on them. Slow pace, elite defense. But this Virginia Tech team, I think, has the chops to maybe just win the game outright. Ken Pom has a 63-61. It wouldn't shock me, especially if Sean Padula is able to continue playing as well as he has. Now, he's priced at 7.7 against Virginia, which should push some ownership away. Now, he was priced at 5.7 when he dropped 60 against Clemson. He had 31 against FSU. And then he put up another 55 against Miami, their most recent game over the weekend, at 7-1. On the road against Virginia, I don't foresee him putting up those type of numbers. I do think we can start to back off of him, but his usage rate in these games has been so astronomically high. It's been ridiculous. You can't even begin to fade him and still compete in the top ends of GBPs. But this is a spot where we can get away. And if people chase the game logs here, it'll come into our favor. I think he still puts up a solid score. Maybe he flirts with near 30, but it's not a quote-unquote gotta-have-it type score. We can be okay with fading him. Where I want to look here is on the Virginia side, Ryan Dunn, who's sitting there at 7K. It's a price point people are probably going to ignore, especially if they just straight look at his logs. He was underwhelming against Wake Forest. Virginia got into another situation where Wake Forest was hitting shots. They didn't have the offense to keep up, and suddenly they lose 66-47. Dunn has a strong rebounding rate. He has great rates across the board. He's not a big-time offensive threat. He is a lot like Reese Beekman in that regard, early Reese Beekman. But he has a very high floor typically because of his great peripheral contributions. So he's the player that I do like in this matchup, and I do believe he'll be low owned because 7K might feel like it's a little bit high, but he's a very strong play in all formats, maybe more so a single entry guy because of the strong floor, but maybe he doesn't necessarily have the upside in a game like this. But I think he ends up racking up a ton of rebounds and stocks in this particular matchup. Beekman there at 7.5. It's kind of a take it or leave it type price with him. That's generally where he's at. I don't know that we need to roster him. Always like Beekman, but unless he's going to be lower 6K, mid 6K range, he's not really in the conversation for me. They did mess with the starting lineup a bit last game, against Wake Forest. They started Jordan Minor, and Jake Groves got back into the game. Blake Buchanan went to the bench, played under 10 minutes, and Andrew Rohde came off the bench. But Rohde still played his customary 30-plus minutes, even though he came off the bench. Still not that effective. What happened is Groves played under 20 minutes. So even if Groves is a starter, I don't think he's playable anymore because his minutes are just shot. If Jordan Minor starts again, playing 22 minutes, he had 9 points, 5 rebounds, a block, and a steal. He's actually sort of interesting, right? Because he's only 3'6". So a repeat start from Minor definitely puts him in the conversation. And with this slate being basically all locked at the same time, there are a few games after that start at 5, UCF, Texas, which we'll talk about next, West Virginia, Oklahoma, but all the rest of the games all lock at the same time. So we'll have 6 games worth of starters all pre-lock, and we'll know what Virginia is going to do. So from that regard, it doesn't make it very hard to figure out, right? On the Virginia Tech side, I mentioned I'm not really going to be on Padula. Couture, who is supposedly going to play in this one. We'll see what happens there. MJ Collins, Tyler Nickel, all these rotational players, Robbie Barron, they're all cheap, but this isn't the best spot to go against in Virginia, right? There is one player in particular that I want to use. It is the DVP spot that we know, we love. Virginia is starting to use some different combinations like Jordan Minor to rectify their issues in the paint. Like they're giving up those big rebounding games. They're allowing, front court players to just absolutely torch them. And they're starting to rotate through and do some things, Benedict, to make that stop. And they did okay against Efton Reed. They didn't keep him, they kept him below a slate breaking type performance. In the last couple of games against Virginia, they haven't really gotten punished by the opposing big. I do want to continue to push that out there, though, and it's a DVP spot, especially in GPPs, that we want to use because nobody else is. And that brings us to Lynn Kidd, who priced at $7K. It's fair for him where he's been over the last month and a half. He has had an absolute breakout season, averaging 15 and 7. I don't know how many people saw him go from role player and like a moderate role player at best to borderline star of the team. Obviously, Padula is starting to take over here, but Lynn Kidd definitely has the chops, the ability, and the physicality to make life difficult for Virginia here, even if they decide to stick with Jordan Minor or they go back to Blake Buchanan in the starting lineup. Looking at Kidd, 24% usage rate, 25% shot rate, 5th best true shooting percentage in the country, shooting 67% from the field overall, drawing 5 fouls per 40, and he has a combined rebounding rate of nearly 35%. So that is our guy. That's who we want to use, Lynn Kidd, if we're going anybody from the Virginia Tech side. All right, West Virginia versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma 12.5-point favorites, a 145 total. We got away from our man Ray Battle in a tough matchup. Obviously, against Houston, he was disastrous. The last 2 games, he's been kept under 30, and he's had some pretty tough spots, Texas, Kansas State. On the road against Oklahoma, Porter Moser's defense will be ready for him. He's only priced at 7.4, which is an advantageous price for Ray Battle because of his high usage rate, high shot rate. It's going to be hard not to use him. Oklahoma's defense does worry me, but I think the volume will be there for him. It wasn't against Houston because he got into some stupid early foul trouble, and they were just in his shorts the whole rest of the way. Now, he has committed 3+ fouls in 4 straight. On the road against Oklahoma, that guard trio that they have drawing fouls, I'm worried. I'm definitely worried, but I am going to have Battle, I think, at 7.4. It's just way too much upside not to be using him in most, if not all, of our lineups. The rest of the West Virginia team, not that exciting. Noah Farrakhan at 6'3" has had his moments, but this matchup is just awful. You do have Kerr Kriisa sitting there at 5'6", playing 30+ minutes, I suppose, but a very lower end option as well. Patrick Sumanek, who had been playing big minutes, 20+ in 4 straight, is dealing with a illness. I guess, COVID is making a comeback. Don't call it a comeback, but COVID is making its rounds to the collegiate world. If Sumanek is back, starting, playing, big minutes, again, this will be the second tier of games, but he's only 4-1. He has played pretty well, 18+ fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. A value option there if you want to use it. On the Oklahoma side, we certainly want to consider, because West Virginia, outside of Ray Battle, it's been tough. Jesse Edwards was doing what he could before Ray got available with his waiver. Then he got hurt. They don't have a lot of options. And with that, their defense suffers time and time again. The Oklahoma prices aren't that advantageous. We're talking about Javion McCollum at 7'4", Milos Uzan at 6'6", Otega Aoi at 6'5", Jalen Moore at 6'3", and then Sam Godwin at 5'4". So nothing really jumps out there price-wise, but the matchup is premium. And one guy that's super safe is Javion McCollum, who has been a PRA machine for us on the prop betting market, usually where I've been hitting him the most. But you turn around and look at the minutes played and what he's contributing to this team: 35, 36, 37 minutes played in each of their last 3 conference games, taking 9+ shots, heavily involved, becoming the true leader of this team and the go-to guy. It was for a time Otega Aoi, who did get back into it last game, 5 of 15 from the field, 30 minutes played, 25 fantasy points. He had been struggling the first couple games of conference play here, but it looks like Aoi's bouncing back to a degree. The 6'5" price just okay, but this West Virginia matchup is an absolute get-right spot there for Otega. So I want to have some shares there of him as well. And then Milos, he'd be third in my exposure amongst those 3. 6'6" is a little bit too high for me on him. He did hit 40 against TCU, but that was more of an anomaly. He's typically going to be in the low 20s. So I'm utilizing him third amongst those guys, and probably won't have that much ownership on him at all, to be honest. The forwards for Oklahoma, it's a little bit different. Hughley doesn't normally play enough minutes there off the bench at 4'9". It's a lot better at Pittsburgh, just hasn't seemed to work out. Jalen Moore is a nice GPP look, especially in this matchup against West Virginia. And then you have the values, Rivaldo Suarez and Latrey Darthard. Darthard was trending up there, playing over 20 minutes in each of his last 5, but he failed to even hit 5 fantasy points in either of his last 2. Really hard to utilize him. He's not playing anywhere to the level that he did at Utah Valley. Obviously, upper tier competition, so it's to be expected, but I also thought he would have more than 5 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Suarez, he has been a consistent option off the bench, but another low fantasy point per minute player as well. 3.9K, 25 minutes. If you need him, you have him. Lower end value, but there you have it. And then UCF versus Texas. Texas 8-point favorites, total of 139. Now, UCF surprised me beating Kansas. I did not think that would happen. This UCF team, I'm really kind of down on them overall and felt like they were going to get their doors blown off there. Now, that's how I feel about them in this matchup against Texas, but I won't doubt them again because anything can and will happen in college basketball. Now, looking at the current Texas starting lineup with our guy, Dylan Dessou, heating up, hopefully not a little bit too early, coming off the loss, 3-point loss there against West Virginia on the road. That was tough. Max Asmus, Dylan Mitchell, and Brock Cunningham all played over 30 minutes. Dylan Dessou, Tyrese Hunter both played over 22 minutes, and those were your starting 5. The bench pieces, Caden Shedrick, after missing the game before that, played just 4 minutes. Zirik Onyema, 13, Ethiel Horton, 17, and Kendall Weaver, 18. So right about an 8-9-man rotation. Looking at this Texas squad, Dylan Mitchell looks fantastic at his price. It is now dipped down there around 6'5" after he was up over 8 for a time. It's tough to utilize him, though, in a main build because of the fact that his tapered off production does coincide with the fact that Dylan Dessou has started the last 2 games and has dominated the usage, dominated the boards, and just been absolutely unstoppable. That game against Cincy, in which he had 4 threes and scored 33 real points, Jesus, Dylan Dessou is just it's way too good, man. It's amazing to me that he was not starting sooner, and I know that they had to bring him along slow after the injuries and stuff, but he is just a man among boys. 7-1, the price continues to come up there. I still like him, like, even in this spot against UCF. Giving him 30-plus minutes, he's just a fantastic play. So he's my favorite Texas play, and that's usually always the case. But I do recognize 6'5" as advantageous, and there's upside there for Mitchell. In non-Dessou GPP lineups, it makes sense to play Mitchell. I'm surprised they continue to play Brock Cunningham so much. He doesn't offer a ton, no upside, not a real floor, so not using him. Caden Shedrick, if he were to get into the starting lineup there, now he's dealing with a back issue, which can be tricky. I doubt he picks up the starting spot again, but if he were and he slid in over Brock Cunningham, that would be a pretty big lineup, but I would put him in play at 4-8. Or if we get a beat spelling it out for us saying that he's back to semi-full health, going to play more tonight, he's a GPP look. But without him starting, you can't utilize him at 4-8. And even if he does, with Dessou and Mitchell, that doesn't leave a lot of extra opportunities for him. And his rebounding numbers are going to continue to go down overall, and certainly his usage as well. We've seen some big games out of Shedrick this year, but with Dessou healthy and rocking now, it's kind of a tough situation to go to. Tyrese Hunter at 5'8". His price is now into last year's price point. It puts him in play for sure. And then you have Mad Max A. Smith, an elite GPP play as always at 8'2", coming off a near 50 against West Virginia. On the UCF side, we have a couple of options here we can look at. The starting five that they will typically utilize: Darius Johnson, Jalen Sellers, Shamari Allen, CJ Walker, and Ibrahim Diallo. Off the bench, we see Omar Payne, DeMar Langford, and Marcellus Avery. Now, Marcellus Avery had been a pretty solid overall bench piece, playing over 20 minutes heading into the conference play. So he has turned into a bit of a non-con hero because his minutes have been under 20 in conference play, and he has failed to register double digits in each of the last 2 games. So it's tough to go there. CJ Walker, 20-plus minutes in 3 straight games. He's only 4-4. You look at the value options here on this slate, and he has started the last 2 games, played no less than 28 minutes in both. If he continues to be a starter, even in a tough spot against Texas, he's definitely one of the better value looks. Shout out to the great Mike Kutry. He is the one that said he was, trending upwards. Kutry said he's going to play more minutes. He did a couple of slates ago. He was early on him, and he ended up panning out quite well. And now we have him in the starting 5, looking like one of the best value options on the slate, regardless of matchup. At 30 minutes, he's 4-4. Like, there's not going to be a lot to be done to pay that off. I think he puts up 20-plus fantasy points. That just seems like it's a plug and play. The rest of the UCF guys, they're just okay. Sellers at 6'8". I mean, that's fair for him. Diallo at 6'7", that's way too expensive. Darius Johnson at 7'1", it's got a little pop there. And then Shamari Allen at 5'9" is not a very great price either. So it's pretty much Walker in this one, or Dessou. All right, so that is the main slate. Looking at the cores for this one, there's a lot of interesting plays for a 8-game slate. And I do think we'll see a little bit of stretched out ownership there. At the top, there should be some obvious ones that we see that do kind of overlap with the rest of the field. But like I said, I think we'll have the opportunity to find different pathways here. The price of Tolu Smith is hard to get away from, and I do think he ends up being chalk regardless. And I think Clifford Omarui ends up being relatively chalky as well, to semi-volatile plays. So keep that in mind while you're building your lineups here on this slate. My core is going to be the following: Dylan Dessou of Texas, which I'm just going to go right back to him. I don't think he stops. This UCF team has size. They've got, fouls to use, but Dessou is just cooking right now. So that's core play number 1. Subject to change, of course. Core play number 2 is going to be CJ Walker, because we're going to need that value at 4-4. It just makes way too much sense. So we're going to have to plug him in there. And this is, in case you're wondering, a slate in which I do like more than 3 forwards. So I will likely be using more than 3 forwards in a lot of my lineups, just so we're aware. And then core play number 3, a little bit tougher because there are a myriad of options that are going to be usable. But I think we got to use a guard here because we're just giving you a couple of forwards, and that 7-4 price point for him is just so hard to get away from. So core play number 3 is going to have to be Raekwon Battle. So we got a guard, we got a forward, we got a value guy. Battle, Dessou, and Walker. Those are the 3 we're going to start with. Feel pretty good about all of those guys. We'll give a shout to Alex Caravan as the posh play of the day. There you have it. All right, PrizePicks. Let's see what we got for PrizePicks here. Trevor says, I like to watch defense and kids that care to play and want to make it to the next level versus pros who don't give up and just looking for the next paycheck. NBA died when Kobe left. Also, NBA died for me when the Sonics were stolen in the night. Maybe not like the Browns, the original Browns, but without the Sonics in Seattle, like, what is the NBA? What even is the NBA? What is Gamora? Why is Gamora? What is the NBA? Because I know they might be bringing the Sonics back, which is great. I'll definitely take my kids to probably check it out. They got a great arena out there in Seattle right now, but I don't know. I just feel burnt by the NBA. So I definitely understand what you're saying there. All right, props. We'll start with PrizePicks. We hit a couple of nice ones tonight on the points. Talking with Kutri last night inspired me to kind of stay away from some of the PRA stuff. Although we're all over the Dalton Connect PRA, and he just hit it with his points. But I'm trying to focus on singular categories there so we don't get caught up with the hook, the 21 on the 21.5 and all that. So starting with points, there are a couple that stand out immediately to me that I feel pretty strong about. Dylan Dessou over 15.5 real points against UCF. He's just, honestly, do you feel like anyone on UCF has a chance to stop him? I certainly don't. That's going to be a really fun game in which he just absolutely detonates. I feel confident in that. We have our guy, Janai Broom, going up against Vanderbilt. I haven't talked about him a lot because those Auburn slates are so tough, but this is a prop I want to hit. Even if Broom only plays 25-ish minutes against Vanderbilt, he does have the ability to put up 20 real. So we'll take his over 16.5 real points there going up against that Vanderbilt team. We have an under here, Jemiah Neal going up. The ASU's going up against UCLA, under 11.5 points against UCLA. As bad as they've been, their defense and their pace are still terrible enough, are still strong enough, I should say, to slow teams down. Jemiah Neal is not going to have any success scoring 12 plus. So we will take his under there. And it's a confident under. I don't take many unders, but that is a confident under that will be on. And then looking at Lynn Kidd over 11 points versus Virginia, I feel good about Lynn Kidd. This is the matchup. Get him, hurt him. Let's tear that Virginia front court up. Speaking of Lynn Kidd, he also has a PRA number. I know I said I'm kind of leaning away from PRAs, but I am going to target sub 20 PRAs because those are advantageous for starters, especially starters playing 25 plus minutes like Lynn Kidd in a matchup that he can absolutely terrorize in. 17.5 points, rebounds, and assists over that number. He's going to have like 15 real and 8 rebounds. So that's going to be an easy over for Lynn Kidd, and we're all over that one. All right, let's wrap it up here. I feel like we got a good handle on it. I will have a sheet up in the late morning for the main slate in our Discord. Will also be coverage for the night slate and be the article breakdown with a more robust game-by-game style there. And on the non-show slates, we'll be doing further game-by-game stuff in those breakdowns. We've been doing a lot of player pool lists and projection sheets, but now that CFB is over, we're going to definitely put more numbers and more data and more information into those articles. So you guys get every bit of information that you need. Next time the Super Show will be on air will be this Friday, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight for you East Coasters. It is a chance of maybe getting Mike back on the show, but we'll also holler at our boy Razzle. Maybe we'll get him on for a time as well. And then we'll get back to the efficient sub 1 hour shows because by myself, we got no shot of going under 2 hours. You get me talking about college basketball, and I just can't stop. Appreciate everybody's continued support. Make sure on your way out, if you haven't done it already, that you hit that like button. Continue to check out the Super Show live and on demand right here on the FTN Network. And I will see you guys on Friday night. Thanks. Take care and see you in the Discord with the green screens and window trips. Take care.